U.S. President Donald Trump says he is in the, quote, final throes of reaching a Middle East peace deal. When asked whether it would be a matter of days or weeks, he said it should take 2 or 3 days.
We have ongoing negotiations in Iran and with Iran, and that hasn't stopped. And we could have at least an idea by 1 or 2 days from now, but I think it's going well. The blockade continues to hold 100%. Nothing is getting through our blockade. No oil, no income, no nothing. Nothing's getting through the blockade.
Well, we're going to get some analysis on all of this now with Ali Vaez, who's the Iran project director for the International Crisis Group, joining me live from Geneva. Ali, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. Here again, Donald Trump saying a, quote, powerful deal with Iran is just days away. I think it's something like the 37th time someone recorded that the U.S. president has made this kind of claim. Do you think this time a deal could happen?
Well, look, it's always a risky thing to predict what President Trump will do, but it is true that the deal has been mostly finalized. But it is also true that he is uncomfortable with certain elements of it, because at the end of the day, if there is a deal, Iran would have to benefit, especially economically, and that would generate a political backlash in Washington that the president is uncomfortable with. And this deal at this stage is not going to resolve some of the fundamental issues, including one of the reasons that this war started, which is the nuclear question. So the president has been stuck in this position between an unwinnable war and an unpresentable deal. And that's why he's vacillating between the two all the time.
So just from the Iran point of view, what's your assessment of how Iran might be seeing the situation at the moment, particularly when it comes to this particular deal and those non-negotiables that you were just mentioning?
Well, look, the Iranian position is not really entirely dissimilar in the sense that going back to a conflict which has been very costly for them, they have survived it, yes, but it has been devastating for their economy, and the continuation of the current situation in which they are subject to a U.S. naval blockade and their ally in Lebanon is being pummeled by Israel all the time is also not very attractive. But they also, in a similar position as the United States, they do not want to concede what they didn't lose on the battlefield. And so this is again why the Iranians are also hesitant. But at the end of the day, I think because in Iran we're not talking about a democratic system, the political backlash that this would produce is more manageable than in Washington. And this is why the Iranians, I think, are more ready to sign on the dotted line than is the case in the United States.
But concretely, what do we think would be in this deal? Would Iran get the things it wants, more control of the Strait of Hormuz, more control of its nuclear program? Or is that going to be a red line for the U.S. still?
So look, all this deal would do is that it would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which would be a process. It would not be immediate. It would take several weeks for it to happen. Second thing it would do is that it would end the war at the regional level. But again, that would remain very fragile with the Lebanon dimension. And it would outline in very broad terms what the parties will be negotiating about the details of a nuclear deal in return for sanctions relief. There will be some language about non-aggression in it, but a lot of this is non-binding. A lot of it is open to interpretation. And I'm sure even after the deal is announced, the Iranians would say that they would continue to charge a service fee for transit to the Strait of Hormuz, and the US would say, no, there will be no toll. So there will be even differences in interpretation. But all this deal would do is to basically consolidate the ceasefire. It would not resolve anything. And my own view that is very hard to imagine that it would actually ever get into stage two, because stage two would require the kind of difficult, complex, technical negotiations that the Trump administration so far has not done in any other case, not just in the case of Iran.
But if there's no stage two, what does that mean? That we would just be in a sort of unending ceasefire?
That means that we will go back to status quo ante pre-February 28th, when the US and Israel launched an attack against Iran. That means that, again, Iran's nuclear program will not be resolved. It would not get sanctions relief. Tensions with Israel will continue. But at least we would not be in a situation that the strait would be blocked and we would be just on the brink every single day.
Some might argue that perhaps it's interesting for Iran to stretch things out, if you like, to not agree to even a ceasefire to try and keep the upper hand on Donald Trump. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes and no. There is an infinite amount of tolerance that the Iranian society and economy has. It's not infinite. It's limited. Number one, and number two, they understand that there is a timeline here because President Trump is worried about midterm elections in November in the United States. Israel has its own elections this fall. There are the World Cup games in the United States. So there are certain milestones in this period, but if we go beyond this window, then President Trump is liberated and he can do whatever he wants. He can go back into this conflict. So there is a window of opportunity, even from the Iranian perspective, to try to consolidate their gains. And if, in fact, President Trump was willing to agree to a deal last week or the week before that, I think the Iranians were ready to finalize it. So the party that is dragging its feet at this moment is President Trump, because of course he put the bar too high and now has difficulty reaching the kind of agreement that he can frame as Iranian capitulation.
There's also Israel's role in all of this. This comes after there have been these growing reports of Trump's anger with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump reportedly warning him that he would be isolated if he continued to strike Iran. Could you see this war eventually leading to a break between the U.S. and Israel?
So I think decoupling is a very strong word. We're not there yet, but it has definitely created fissures between the US and Israel that did not exist. Politically, it has created a backlash against Israel in the United States, in President Trump's MAGA camp, among Democrats. And if this continues, and this basically picture of Israel dragging the United States into a war that is very unpopular and not allowing the US to finalize a deal and extricate itself from that war, I think is going to cause more damage for Israel in the United States. But again, I don't want to call it a break, but there's definitely a gap. There are definitely different objectives and end games here. And the more the situation continues, the wider this gap will become.
Ali, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. Ali Vaez, the Iran Project Director for the International Crisis Group. Thank you.